Hey, it's Stu, and this is a reading wrap up. Let me see. I had a really beautiful week outdoors, but a hectic week doing other things. So, although when I'm kind of summarizing all the things I read, it's still quite a bit. I felt like I had a hard time getting to reading. That's how I felt. And I certainly had a hard time engaging in these books the way that I normally can. Sometimes it takes a little while just to kind of get my thoughts to stop moving around. But I found that that thing that all readers do, like all of a sudden I'm like, how many pages am I in and what has just happened, or how long have I listened, and have I even been thinking about this book, or am I thinking about other things? So it's been a little bit of a struggle week in that regard. Maybe one of the reasons is because at the beginning of the week, I read two books that for my own life triggered a lot of, or activated, I like the word activated better. I'm tired of violence words. Activated a lot of introspection and reflection, and maybe even some, some need to be kind and gentle with myself. So the first book I'm going to talk about, I already talked about a little bit in my last wrap up because I was almost done with it, but I did finish. And so I just kind of want to start this video with that. And that's Paradiso 17 by Hannah Lilith Asadi. And sorry for that reflection right there, but I read this digitally only. It's a new book. I did see it at an independent bookstore out new, but I get my books thrifted in ARCs or, from friends. Yeah, that's it. Used is what I do right now with books. And in any case, it's Women's Prize for Fiction is what put this book on my radar, and why I read it digitally when I have all of these physical books to also manage reading. This book is about a man who it's the story of a Palestinian who's searching for a home and to feel at home when the concept therein has been violently and cruelly removed from him. And I think there's a lot of work in this book about what that actually does to humans, and what that means inside of our own inner lives to have been forcefully removed from the concept and the physicality of home. What I really understood this book to be was Hannah Lilith Asadi's want to explore her father, the complexity of her father, and her relationship with her father. And it's told from POV of the father, and it is a fiction, but kind of after reading the author's note and even how I projected my own self into this book, I came to believe that this is a work of the daughter understanding the father, and what made him tick, and what brought him down in ways that could be understood through a certain lens, but also made him very authentically who he was if looked from another lens. This main character, so this is a bit of a spoiler. The main character suffers from a disease, and the daughter character in the book, assists the father in this with this. And the other sort of big aspect of this book is to it always reads like a dream, and it's surreal, and part of that has to do with like being forced out of your home, and then just like the ongoing trauma, like the re-traumatization that is happening and has been happening to the Palestinian people in regards to their home and their sense of having worth, as a global understanding of their worth as humans as humans, because certainly genocide is dehumanizing and in every way possible. So this book kind of reads like a dream, and it associates that, but it's also like how when you look back on your life and how it goes and where it all went, sort of like through reflective nostalgia, or like through reflection of your life, it just kind of feels like a dream. And I think this book really nailed that as an atmosphere. I definitely felt, as I was someone who cared for my father, who also was dealing with, you know, how he got to where he was and how he was forced to be who he was, and that had impacts on the decisions he made and the way in which he actualized himself through his children, and also his illness. So I had a lot of places that I could really relate with this book, although my story is quite different, and a lot of places where just it put me in a sort of an emotional state that I could kind of be like, this is a book I'm detached from, but you know, we all know when we're being activated, what that kind of feels like. And I think that was fantastic. I am going to recommend this book actually to several people who are in my sort of reading circles, and I am recommending it to you if you're watching this YouTube video. Read the book. It's a great book. I hope and I trust, based on the books that I've read so far for the Women's Prize, and again, I hope to make a video about that Paradiso 17 will indeed be on the shortlist. Compared to some of the other books, I think it is definitely shortlist material. Moving on to the next book I read, which was We Pretty Pieces of Flesh by Caldwell Brown. This book also activated me in a lot of ways, and I would definitely say there are some content warnings for SA, substance abuse, and sort of the impact on misogynistic patriarchy and the objectification of women's and girls' bodies. So don't go into this book if and it should be like what's going on right now with high profile figures being, you know, brought to the collective attention that high profile figures have made young girls into pretty pieces of flesh in a really chronic, insidious and systematic way. Although that's not news to any of us who have lived as pretty pieces of flesh, it's still like really salient that the impunity and the cultural norming of objectifying women and girls and glorifying in a toxic masculine environment that construct. So if that is going to activate you or just put you over the top based on what's happening in the media right now, then, you know that before you go into this book and being a place to read it. I spent some time in my life in Barnsley, which is mentioned in this book, in South Yorkshire. This book is set in Doncaster, and it is written in the South Yorkshire dialect. Sometimes I think like sort of writing books in dialects or writing out accents, like recently it was in another book that I read, Just Follow It. They were like writing the Boston accent, and for some reason, a little ways, it was annoying me. It annoyed me a little bit. But this is, the whole book is written in the dialect, and I think it's like Kes for a Kestrel and a Knave, which also has just the dialogue is written in Yorkshire dialect. I think it's really authentic, and I think it raises awareness to problematize the standardization even of written English, which happens so much through our education system. In this book, we follow three great friends as they leave what's called in the States elementary school and enter what's called in the States middle school, and then through high school and into university for some. for two of the three friends, and then beyond, we end with them in their 30s. And all of the things that I said before, them experiencing the reality and the normalization that their existences and their bodies are objectified, and not cared for by society at almost all times, and up and through, like, there's and the author herself suffers from a chronic illness. There's a little exploration about how even with chronic illness, it's just not, it's like, to be able to live with a chronic illness and be in your body and it just not being understood or valued, or what's normalized is that you know, there's just the ableism that also plays into the constructs that make people pieces of flesh rather than fully formed humans. I really liked, although I found it quite activating, the beginning of this book, and I think the book fell off in the end. I think, like, the author tried hard to kind of keep it all together and didn't do such a great job as she did in the beginning. But, you know, that's just my reading experience. I've already recommended this book to someone, and I think that they try not to have too many physical books. So I'll ask them if they want it as an ARC. So it goes in little free library or to a friend. I will ask them if they want it, and if not, then I will put in a little free library. I think these books that can be quite, I don't know, I'm like coming to the place, especially when I give books like out into like little free libraries, that do I want to leave a little note with the content warnings in there, just so that sometimes people like to look up books and reviews before they read them. Sometimes they like to go in kind of blind, as I do. And I think sometimes having content warnings is really useful. I would also say, for some readers who don't have, like me, reading the dialect was fine, fantastic. I could hear it in my mind because I spent some time, I actually lived in South Yorkshire for a little bit of time, and I've been back many times. And so I found it very endearing, and I absolutely got the dialect. For people who haven't, especially in the US, where there's quite a bit of generalizable accent intolerance, as people don't necessarily, can't distinguish and wouldn't know and wouldn't have endearment to South Yorkshire in the general population. It could be a little bit difficult to read. I've heard some reviewers who are from the UK say, you know, it took a while to get into the rhythm, and once that I did. And I'm assuming of these reviewers that they've, at least in their media, had some, you know, and or in their friends groups have met people from South Yorkshire, so the accent wouldn't be completely, at least it's seen Kes. So there's some familiarity. That's the other sort of like trepidation I have putting it into a little free library. I worry that someone's going to be like, I can't even understand this, and then just not pass it on the way that I would hope. But, you know, it's not mine to hope for after. Again, book comes under pretty high recommendation by me, understanding the content warnings and knowing that you're going to have to read a dialect that you may or may not be familiar with. And there are some ways, like watching YouTube videos of people from the place so that you can hear the accent a little bit. And it's they call it its broadness, so that when you're reading it, kind of makes the spellings and the rhythm makes more sense. I thought a really interesting jump from We Pretty Pieces of Flesh by Caldwell Brown to Big Swiss by Jen Beagin. I thought it was great. I would also even recommend the pairing of these two, just in the different ways we're exploring some similar themes. In Big Swiss, I mean, even by its cover, you can tell is unhinged. There's some unhingedness to this. So again, content warnings for if you're going through some, you know, an emotional and or mental flu, and you don't want to read about obsession, or folks who are, in therapy, working through their very real and their very human issues in a way that's meant to be, entertaining, then it's not the time to pick this up. But the premise of this book is there's a transcriptionist. She works for a sex therapist in Hudson. So the author is from Hudson, New York, too. And a sidebar on the premise, because I'm a plot person, a setting person. I'm sorry. The setting of Hudson is just, yes, Jen, you did great with the setting, building this setting. I absolutely got the groove of this town. And I think same Doncaster, I got the groove of Donnie. So I really enjoyed being in this setting. This book uses absurdism and some kind of absurdist humor to tell the story of this therapist, this transcriptionist, who becomes obsessed with one of the patients of the sex therapist, whom she names Big Swiss because they're originally from Switzerland. And the transcriptionist reads all of the therapy sessions, so she knows things about this character, who then she meets at the dog park. And she knows it's her because she knows enough. She knows the voice. She's really able to recognize the voice because she hears just the voice from transcribing. And thus kind of ensues an affair. And it is scandalous because the transcriptionist doesn't disclose that she knows personal and private things about Big Swiss. I really appreciated the sort of exploration of just kind of quirks of humans, and then pushing into what is a quirk and then what is sort of like a pathology that needs maybe therapy or needs to be worked on. And it's something that I grapple with in a sort of contemplative sense of people can be quirky. People can not need to be fixed all of the time, right? Quirks don't necessarily need to be fixed. That's what makes us genuine and authentic. That being said, sometimes our own selves get in the way, not because of us, but because of societal constructs, right? And then sometimes, we need to realize how sometimes some ways that we behave create consequences over and over that don't serve us, or serve our self-fulfillment or happiness in life. And I think this book kind of looks at that through the building of these characters, and I think it does a great job of building characters. I would call this upmarket, not quite literary fiction, but its character development, its dialogue, and its setting are all great. And if you're able to read it, given the content warnings that I said at the beginning, I think this is it was actually, I would call it an entertaining and fun read. And it was, after reading two books, which really activated me in ways, in deeply emotional ways, I thought it was a great sort of tie in to kind of step back and use a little bit of absurdism and humor and recalibrate on some of those themes. I think I'm late to the game. I was looking for it for forever and finally found it, which I traded for at an independent bookstore. And I'm going to bring it back to the same independent bookstore and trade out for another kind of book that I've been just looking for and not seeing in the thrifting environment that I do. So if you haven't heard about Big Swiss and you sort of I guess it was classified as Weird Girl Lit. I don't know if that's quite right, but it's classified as Weird Girl Lit. Some unhinged characters, and a bit of absurdism, a bit of reclamation of also human autonomy and human bodies as particularly female bodies as well. Then Big Swiss, for you. If you see this cover and you say that book's for me, you're right. The cover definitely, this cover definitely lets you know if you are probably going to be the reader of this book or not. Okay, all of this was happening while I was listening to The Inheritance Lost by Kiran Desai. This book is sweeping. It has some really big emotional and conceptual moments. And I don't know if listening is the right way to engage with that kind of breadth. There are some amazing lines. Like, I didn't annotate because I was listening and had the physical. And, I don't annotate in my books because I don't keep them. I try to keep them circulating with very little exception. And so I didn't highlight any of the quotes, but there's a lot of really quotable lines in this book. This is a real exploration of identity, dysphoria, and colonization as well, or colonialism. It won the Man Booker. Excuse me. And was a finalist according to the front. No, it was a winner of the National Critics Circle. So we're dealing with literary fiction. There was some there's a lot of style in this writing okay, so let me back up just a little. I read this book. It's been on my shelf. It's been here for a while, and I was glad to get to it. I'm meaning to get to it. But for the 52 book club, it's read an author and then read an author related to the author you read. So I picked Kiran Desai's The Inheritance of Loss because I love Anita Desai. And plan to read Rosarita coming soon, which I think is quite a bit smaller. And I had read 2 books by Anita Desai last year, and I loved them both. So it's mother-daughter, I believe. And, who am I to say anything? I think this book will stay with me. So in the premise, we're on the northern Himalayas. There's some insurgency with Nepal. It's uprooting people's lives. But so is like sort of the progression of the order, the natural order, meaning people who really benefited from the English colonialism. And then like with the absence of it, and then them not being privileged by that structure anymore. We also have children of characters who are in the UK and in the US, and how they're trying to make sense of their identity and their belonging and what it means to be Indian, with its history and its diversity and and all of that, but also like what it means to be like seen as Indian from the foreign eye, not from a colonial eye, but literally just like as the foreigner living in, or the immigrant living in. And I think that there's just a lot. It's a very dense work. I had just read On Beauty by Zadie Smith, which I also found to be a quite dense piece of work. Again, we're talking about literary fiction, so this kind of density is expected. I would say this is, really beautiful. It does it makes you think about many things, and it made me think about things through new lenses that I actually hadn't spent very much time, maybe some like awareness, but not like necessarily time in contemplation. It illuminated some of that for me. For sure, I'm going to let this go, but this is a book one should read more than one time, and maybe not an audiobook, which is the choice that I made about it. It was certainly challenging to stay engaged in this book as an audiobook, especially because of all of the things that it's doing and the challenges that I told you about, just where my mind's at these days. So of course I've read this book. And I will note that this, probably like almost all literary fiction that's, that you're interested in the subject matter and the setting and the characters of, probably needs a reread. I won't hold on to it. I'll let it keep going. I keep seeing it over and over, and trust that if I'm I might have an epoch where I just like want to reread, that I'll keep it on a list of books that I'd like to reread, so that I don't get caught up in keeping too many books. That's not what I'm doing right now. So I'm letting it go. If you like dense, complex, beautiful, sophisticated and diverse prose. Like there's even some, like the use of lists in here is such an interesting concept. I've complained about it before. I think she does the list well. I've met, authors that use lists in ways that aren't as effective, and it annoys the crap out of me. And yeah, this is a book for you. Okay. Then I had a bright sunny day where I just kind of wanted to devour a book, and I just wanted a genre book. And so I had this arc of The Disaster Gay Detective Agency by Lev Ak Rosen. And this book doesn't come out until June 2nd of this year. So we're a couple months from its release, or a month and a half from its release. I actually got this, this book actually came from the Friends of the Library. They had a stack of ARCs, and they asked me if I wanted to go through them. And I think I said it in the video, if you've watched it, that I took them to put in my local little free library because it had been cleaned out, and has since been cleaned out several times, like again last week. And then kept a few just to see if I'd like to read them. And I have a little stack of books that I'm like, if I don't read this soon, then just keep them out, keep them circulating. I did read this. I did read it pretty much in a setting. It delivered on all of the things. We have a cast of characters whom we get to know on a somewhat like almost sitcom surface level. It reminded me a bit of sitcom characters. There's representation here. And then of course, if you're gonna, this is genre fiction, which is meant to be compulsive, propulsive, and page turnery. So there will be use of tropes and sort of maybe like some stereotypes that work or don't work. And of some of the identities that I'm not one to come up with a definitive of if that stereotype, how harmful that stereotype is, but I could recognize that there is some, use of that, because we don't have a whole lot of time to build the characters. And again, that's kind of how sitcoms work as well. Yeah, it's a fun little romp about a group of friends, a found family even. They live in New York, the setting's New York. They're sort of like living their, friends-esque lives. They have these jobs that are kind of part of their lives and a little bit part of the context of who they are, but it's really their friendship and then the situations they find themselves in, particularly around them, coming into being in the possession of something that gets them into some trouble, and how they sort of like start super sleuthing, friend sleuthing, to solve this puzzle, get themselves out of the danger, and I think the cover and the title, like it, again, good marketing, because it is what it is. It's a romp, it's a ride. Lev Ak Rosen, I think he's a bit they are a bit prolific, as I don't know their pronouns, I'll say they. They're a bit prolific. There are quite a bit of publications here, and so for the fans of them, this probably a much anticipated release. I found it fun. I have someone I'm handing it to today, part of the reason I'm getting this video taken care of. Okay, I read that in the sunshine. It was sort of my propulsive read, my digital only read, which had nothing to do with any of the prizes. I don't know how I came upon this. I can only assume it was a YouTuber, and I have to get much better at remembering if I get a recommendation from a YouTube channel to note what channel it is so that I can give credit where credit's due. But I read The Beast of the Sea by Ida Turpainen, and this is translated from the Finnish by David Haxton. This book is about the sea cow and sort of like the exploration of the north of the world, in what's now called the Bering Strait. In fact, we get to meet in the first section of the book the captain, Bering, for whom everything's named. This to me read like a nonfiction. It's not my nonfiction era. it gave me a lot of things to think about, and I can see that this is, again, this is someone who probably did a lot of research into these characters. I don't know most of these characters, that most of the premise of this book. So I would have to then like be interested enough to go and do research to make any kind of comments of how many of these characters are real. We know that Bering is, and I think I'm going to operate under an assumption that the characters in these books all existed. And this author fictionalized just kind of their experiences because we know who they are via historical document, but we don't necessarily know their stories. So in looking at the humans that were involved in exploration and the collection and documentation of sea creatures, insects, in places like natural history museums, the English Natural History Museum in London, and there's also the Natural History Museums in Helsinki mentioned in this book. The impact of, for example, and I think I did look this up, like Europeans arrive in the area where the northern sea cow existed, and then within a very short amount of time, they're made extinct. So sort of like impact of humans on the natural world, the need to document and understand it. So this book starts in like mid 1700s. I can't look it up now because I don't have it anymore, but and then goes through end of the 19th century, following. So we got a lot of history and we got a lot of sort of life science, biological sciences in this book. I have someone for whom I found it hard to be engaged in this book for all of the reasons that I said before, and also this read sort of like more like a nonfiction. There wasn't very much plot, dialogue, characterization. There's some inner workings of characters. There's some beautiful prose, but I found it hard to stay engaged. I did stick with it. I thought, let me just DNF it and see if I can try it, and maybe that's what I should have done, but I stuck with it because it's not very long and I was getting some things out of it. And if what I got out of it was a little bit of knowledge about this place and time in the world, which I do like setting, and to give this as a book recommendation to a few folks who I think this will be just right up their alley, then I got that. If you like books about nature, about humans' relationships with nature and historical fiction, then that book is for you. The final book I'm going to talk about, I didn't feel like there's that many, but this video is already quite long, is The Memory Police by Yoko Agawa, and the translator of this book from the Japanese is Stephen Snyder. This book was written in the 90s, but came into the English translation, at least the edition that I'm holding, in 2019. It is speculative, dystopian, I would call it. And it's quiet. I think if you read this book as a dystopian, and you put it up with, and I was reading a lot of sort of like dystopian at the end of the year, and you put it alongside the greats because there have been some really great classic dystopian novels, you might be disappointed because I feel like this book does other things besides just the dystopian genre. I think there's some cultural storytelling aspects that this book does that maybe are a little unfamiliar to me, as I definitely come from a background of, Western style storytelling. And those classics that I am referring to are definitely Western dystopian classics. In the sort of premise of this book is there are protagonists and everyone involved. The setting is an unnamed island that is isolated, obviously, from any mainland, and the people in it are experiencing what's called disappearances. So I think this is an allegory for like when extinctions but it's things are disappearing, and some of them it seems via nature, but others seem like the reason that they're disappearing is because the tyrannical governing force and their military arm called the military police, the memory police, sort of caused the disappearances. And I thought it was really interesting to explore, sort of dystopia in this, especially now, that our protagonist isn't actually really all that bothered. She seems pretty passive. In some ways, just trying to live her life and like just kind of rolling with the punches. She has a mother who is taken and maybe murdered by the memory police. So sort of at the beginning of the novel. So I guess as a reader, you'd almost assume she'd be kind of informed, but in fact, she's just kind of passively like. And this is how I think it is, even existing right now in what seems to be rising in oppressive military state, and in a world where people just say, oh, I guess there's a genocide, and what can we before people could say we didn't see it, so we didn't know, and now they can see it. I'm like, I don't know, what do? I just go on with my life and hope that I can, make life work under the conditions that I'm living under right now. And I think this book did a good job. I think it was a bit dreamy, so a little surreal as it's dystopian anyway. That leads to a little surrealism, but it felt a little surreal, and it was actually really quiet in a lot of ways, with really big tragic sort of like circumstances. And I appreciated that juxtaposition. It left me a lot of room to sit inside of some of these bigger concepts of like the not incredibly deep and profound construct of like if memories are painful, then let's just get rid of them. And if memories make things complex for us to live in peace and harmony or whatever together in a society, so let's remove the things that get in the way of that. And so like, then what's the consequence if you take away collective understandings and or memories? I think like a lot of books that I read from Japan, the translated works from Japan, at first I'm not quite sure what to do with them. I don't know how I feel. I stick with it, and then they just kind of quietly creep up on me, and this one did as well. This is literary fiction. It was a finalist for the International Booker. Must have been in 2019 when this English translation came out. But I also, this book feels a bit book clubby for me, because I think this book, in those quiet ways and in the ways in which they can be interpreted through, you explicate quite a bit out of this book and have different interpretations through different people's lenses. So I could see this as a fantastic book club book. Again, it came out in 2019, so we're talking about 7 years ago. Probably many book clubs have done so, but I guess if I were giving recommendations, as I have been throughout this video, this would be a great book club book. If you like dystopian, read this book. If you like Japanese literature, read this book. If you like sort of like quiet books that make you think a lot, with some pretty heavy themes, but don't necessarily overwhelm you with them, then read this book. I got this book at independent bookstore. I didn't trade for credit. I just got it. And it's the only place I've seen it. I'm like out and about, which surprises me. I think that I'm going to donate this to the Friends of the Library. Yeah, I think they could use a little bit more translated fiction. I normally swoop up whatever's there. So that's where I think that this book is going. I would take it back and maybe try to trade it for credit at an independent bookstore, but there's some like stains, which might have happened when I got it used. So they might have been there, but I know that like reduces the value of the trade back if there are some stains. And so I might as well choose books that that will get me the highest value of trade to take back to independent bookstores and pass this along to the Friends of the Library. So really different books, all very, very different books in this reading group. I had such an interesting and strange and even strained reading period getting through this group of books. They're all sourced and referred to me differently, and I think that was interesting as well. So, you know, this is one of those weeks when I think, as I do at the end of like almost every, I don't know, week, 10 days, think, you know, who am I as a reader? And then I look at this and I have a lot of ways to express the answer to that. So, hopefully I'll do a TBR. We're in a new month. We're well into the new month, and I sort of need, I feel like I have to kind of get control of where my reading's going, but that's my own feeling. So my next video probably will be a TBR. Until then, happy reading.